You know, I am no literary expert, I'm no book critic, but what I am is a fan of The Lord of the Rings. I've read The Silmarillion, I've read The Hobbit, and I've played an embarrassing amount of The Lord of the Rings online. But what I've never done is I've never read The Lord of the Rings all the way through. Each time that I've tried in the past, I've gotten through Fellowship, and then it came to a hard stop when I got to Two Towers. But I figure it's time to give it another try, and along the way, I'm going to give you my reactions to it. So if that's the kind of thing that you're into, come along and join me on this journey as I read through The Lord of the Rings. At this point, I have read through the prologue and the first 3 chapters of Fellowship of the Ring. Now, it's been a while since I last attempted this, so as I'm reading through, it's as though I'm reading everything for the first time. But that being said, things are familiar to me, even though things are happening differently than I am expecting. I was introduced to The Lord of the Rings by watching the Jackson movies. And so, as I've been reading, I've just been constantly picturing them. The characters' images were formed by that film for me. So, really, that is The Lord of the Rings for me. So, it's, as I'm going along in the book, it throws me for a loop when things are different, but, in a good way. I'll be talking about things in terms of the books versus the films a good deal because of all of this. Now, it has been really fascinating as I've been reading through to see those differences and try and piece together why it was done one way in one medium and it was done differently in the other. So just as a for example, the way that Frodo leaves the Shire seems much more leisurely in print. Now, Tolkien is very much playing the long game, and he is really stretching things out as he builds the tension. It's years between when Bilbo leaves after his party and when Frodo actually leaves. Versus Walsh, Boyens, and Jackson, when they do it, it's a much more in your face. This is intense. I think intense is a very good word for it. It seems like there are months at most that transpired between the two. So the approaches that they each take really set everything up from there on out. But I'm getting way ahead of myself when I'm talking about that. Let's just go back to the prologue and kind of work our way through. So the prologue itself is really interesting. There is a ton of world building. There's a ton of backstory. There's a ton of history. And one of the things that just really strikes me is the amount of world building that Tolkien employs here. We have a discussion of the hobbits and their society. We have a discussion of the pipeweed. We have a discussion on the layout of the Shire. And we also get a retelling of the pertinent history that was already told in The Hobbit. So we get a retelling of the finding of the ring, the riddle game, and the encounter with Gollum. But really, that world building is what has me kind of floored. It's really fascinating when you see so much thought has gone into something that you can tell that this is a real living and breathing world. We're not just seeing an environment that exists solely during the span of the story that's being told. What we're seeing here is just one small chapter out of the entirety of the history of this world. And I think that that's just masterfully done, and I think that that is just an absolute treat. Drawing from what I know of the Silmarillion and knowing all of the backstory of the mythology and stuff, having read The Hobbit and knowing that it all carries through, and yet everything seems to build on each other a little bit further as we go along. It just, to me, Middle Earth is very wonderfully fleshed out. Everything that I've encountered of it so far just seems perfectly done, and I'm absolutely loving that. That being said, I'm also from the prologue getting a lot of echoes of the issues that I was having when I was trying to read through before. There's a lot of dry and descriptive information in there. I really could do without some of the geography. And honestly, do we need an entire chapter on pipeweed? Is that something that we need? I was thinking about that, actually. And the thing that kind of makes it okay for me, and really the reason that I can rationalize its inclusion, is that it's like we're actually reading the Red Book of Westmarch. What we're seeing here is something that would have been very important to the hobbits who were writing the book down. It's just, when you look at it that way, it's just a really nice additional piece of world building and really nice breath of life into this very vibrant and vivacious life. But then again, I also get that dryness that really killed me in the past. You know, the Two Towers starts off with about 30 pages of just geographical description, and I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm going to get to that point again, and I'm going to push through it. But right now, it's just kind of really dragging up those bad memories. And then on to chapter 1, which to me, it's kind of amazing how much is going on in chapter 1. It's the story of Bilbo's birthday, and we're also seeing so much else going on. Because one minute we're watching his preparations, and then the next we're off to a pub, and we're seeing two, I'm going to call them elder statesmen, just discussing how much of a weirdo he is and so forth. And then all of a sudden, you know, blink of an eye, now all of a sudden we are in the party itself. And it's kind of like there's a camera attached to a housefly, and the housefly is going all over all of this scene, and it's crazy, but it all ties in and it works very well. I'm sorry to keep harping on this, but it's more world building that I'm seeing and getting from this, and I think that is just cementing it for me that this is such a living world, and it's such a vivacious place that again is not ephemeral and will last only for the duration of the story. So in addition to that, actually, one of the things that I found notable was the absence of Merry and Pippin in the birthday celebration. The film version, we have Merry and Pippin kind of introduced in kind of a, like, again, it's in your face as we need to do with a film due to the restrictions on runtime, but they're presented in more of a, like, hey, pay attention to these guys. These guys aren't going anywhere, and they're going to play a big role in events to come. So that's kind of the vibe that I'm getting from that interaction. But when it comes to the film, or excuse me, when it comes to the book, I'm not getting that. What I'm getting is very little. It's much more like, you know, these could just be random characters that are thrown in there as vignettes or whatever you want to call them. I didn't actually get very much personality. You know, we had these big jokester personalities, you know, big fun, they're friends with each other, they're having a good time. That's the film version. In the book, I couldn't say that I got much at all of Merry. And the only personality that I got from Pippin was, you know, he kind of came off as a spoiled brat with how he was treating Sam, you know, treating him like a servant, which I'll take the film version of this character, thank you very much. One final thought that I had in regards to the differences between the book and the film has to do with the passage of time once again. I couldn't help but think about the relative ages of the different members of the Fellowship, and specifically the hobbits. Now, when we start Fellowship, Frodo is turning 33. It is his 33rd birthday. But by the time he leaves, he's much closer to the age that Bilbo was when he started The Hobbit. So he's right about 50. Now, that wasn't very clear to me, because there was reference to him saying he wanted to leave on his 50th birthday. He wanted to leave the Shire then. But I wasn't clear if that was his birthday that he was just coming up to, or if that was a couple years in the future. That wasn't clear. So I did go and I checked it out online, and Statista has Frodo at 51 in The Lord of the Rings. So I'm assuming that is actually toward the end of the book. But, somewhere between, say, 48 and 51. But they also had Merry at 37 and Pippin at 29. So this means that we have Frodo as a 50-year-old hanging out with guys half his age. It's not a problem for me in the films. They all seem to be about the same age. And for me, I like that a lot better, because we have them all going through kinds of the same things due to their relative ages. They're all about the same age. So you can see the events hit them both similarly and individually, versus it just kind of lands different when we have Merry and Pippin being so young, and then Frodo kind of encroaching into creepy uncle territory. So one last thought to round us out. I'm absolutely loving the inclusion of the poems and the songs in the writing. I knew from my previous readings and from hearing people talk, I had known that Tolkien was a fan of including these in his works. And this time around, it just really struck me. The way it's been woven into the narrative, it just kind of feels ancient. And it feels like the deeds of the past are kind of peeking through the ages to today. And I think that that's really, really neat. I just think that there's something almost magical about that. And I also had a really nice surprise when Frodo is kind of telling his prose, and in the style of Bilbo, the road goes ever on. And we get to the part where it's the song that Pippin sang to Denethor. Denethor is having this big sloppy feast, while Faramir, we know, is riding off to almost certain doom to try and retake the West Bank, or I forget where exactly. Osgiliath, I think he was retaking Osgiliath. But anyways, I just, as I was reading that, I just could not stop picturing that. The tomato juice running down his chin, and it was distracting from what I was reading, of course, but it also just added an extra layer to it for me. It added imagery, and it just kind of was evoking these emotions, and it was a real trip when I got to see that. So I'm finding myself very much excited to continue on with this, to read more, to give you guys more reactions as I go along. It's also stirring up these feelings where I want to go and I want to rewatch the movies, and I want to jump in and play more of the Lord of the Rings living card game by Fantasy Flight. And it's really got me jazzed up, and it's entirely possible that by the time I'm done with this journey, I will have had the absolute time of my life. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider subscribing so that you can see all of these new videos as they come out. I am thinking there's going to be several of these because The Lord of the Rings is a long book. So I'm going to break it up, do a little bit, do a reaction, do a little bit, do a reaction. And I'd love to hear what your thoughts are in the comments. Have you read through this? Are you thinking that I'm way off base and crazy for thinking the way that I am about what I've read so far? I would absolutely love to hear you. Give that thumbs up button a nice healthy smash, and I'll see you in the next one.